I'm Sandy Lowe. This is Bold Strokes Books Bookathon special edition panel on a Tuesday night. Very exciting. This panel is Knowing You, which is a point in the romance arc. And apologies to everyone who was here last night. I did, unfortunately, say the panel was Kissing You, which is tomorrow night. I don't know. In my books, they kiss first. I mean, but...
Nothing wrong with that.
So Kissing You is tomorrow night. Tonight is Knowing You. It's probably better to know first. I don't know. There is a debate we can have later. So group of amazing authors here tonight. We have Barbara Ann Wright, Jessie J. Thoma, Mary P. Burns, and of course, the wonderful Georgia Beers. Thank you all so much for being here. And we do have a recording from Toni Logan, which I will play, hopefully a little better than last night. Before we start our Facebook Live, I do have an opening question for everybody. And that is, what do you like to know about someone? Is it their history? Is it their daddy issues? Is it their most embarrassing moment? What is it that makes you feel like you really know someone? Barbara?
I like that daddy issues got in there, and now I think kissing should come right after the question, what are your daddy issues? And then let's launch straight into kissing. I think that's a great, just romantic opener. No, I want to know, like, what does the person like to do really? Not just like, I like to read or I like to walk or whatever, but really, what do you like to read? What do you like about it? What do you like, why do you like to walk? That sort of thing. Like, it's asking that is less scary than asking, like, what do you see as your place in the universe, which is really what I'm asking about.
Oh, yeah, that's a really, between that and the kissing, I feel like you really go for it. Right.
Yeah. Well, the kissing is for pauses in conversations. That's for the lulls.
Oh, see, yeah, that definitely will keep things interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Jessie, how about you? What do you like to know about someone you meet?
Well, if I'm asking about kissing, I'm going to be sleeping on the couch tonight, so I'm definitely not interested in kissing, except for the one that I'm married to. I guess for our current times, I want to know how people feel about wearing a mask. And then I think want to know if people are going to judge me if I have spit up on my shoulders, because that's always something that I have a real little bit of self-consciousness about. I'm pretty sure I have it on my shoulders right now. So I guess those would be two things that I'd be interested in. Because one, I think if, somebody's willing to just overlook the spit up that you've got on your shoulder, then they're probably my kind of person.
And now we're all looking for it. We're like, does she?
It's there. It's there.
Everybody's leaning in a little bit.
Yeah, it's there. Definitely there.
And we're all overlooking it. So we're good people.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mary, how about you? What is it that you like to know about someone you meet?
I like to know history. I like to know a little bit about their background and maybe where they came from and who's in their family and what sorts of things they like.
Cool. Love it. And Georgia, how about you?
I like to know everything, obviously, but one thing that's really important to me, not necessarily important to me, but tells me a lot about a person, is their family dynamics, because my family is, we're quirky and it's confusing to explain who belongs to who. Like, I have a sister and two stepsisters and a half sister, and there's a lot going on. So I feel like someone who's got some funky family dynamics probably will understand me a little better. So I think that's kind of, and plus, if you've got siblings, how do you relate to your siblings? How do you relate? How is your relationship with your mom? Daddy issues aside, do you have mommy issues? Because, I kind of like family. Family is a big thing for me. So I like to know about somebody's family.
Cool. I like that. All right. So this is a reading panel, and these lovely authors will be reading scenes about their characters getting to know each other. We are going to start with a recording from Toni Logan. She is reading from her release, Gia's Gems. If everybody else could please mute and stop video.
Hi, I'm Toni Logan, and today I'll be reading from my book, Gia's Gems. And Gia's Gems is about Gia Williams, who is living her dream, writing the successful travel magazine column for Elle Online, Gia's Gems, which features a single 30-something lesbian who travels around and finds the little gay gems in each town she visits. But there's just one problem. She is a bit of agoraphobic and she hasn't left her house in years. Gia's Gems is a complete Photoshop fake that started years ago as an innocent joke, but has since turned into kind of a genie that has become harder and harder to put back into the bottle. Lindsay Sprayer is a huge fan of Gia's Gems, and she recently stumbled upon Gia's secret. So late one night, after a couple drinks, she sends Gia an email telling her she knows all about her and threatens to expose her. So the excerpt I'm going to read takes place the morning after Lindsay has sent Gia the email. And right now she's heading to the park with coffee and pastries to meet up with her best friend, Jen, and run everything by her. Jen was lying on the bench, her arms folded across her face as Lindsay approached. "Good morning," she said. Jen groaned as she slowly sat up. "Oh, my head feels like it's going to explode." "What'd you and Cheryl do last night?" "I'd tell you, but I don't think you really want to know." Jen rubbed her temples, then turned and scrunched her face. "Linz, I'm your hairstylist, and I'm proud that you wear my masterpiece on your head. But every time I see you lately, you look a mess. You do realize we're in public." Jen reached over, twisted and smoothed Lindsay's hair until she had it back into looking fashionably messy. "There, now I'm not as embarrassed to be seen with you." "Oh," says the woman who was so drunk one night she was tossing scraps of pizza to a basketball while yelling, "Here, kitty, kitty." Lindsay reminded her as she handed over her to-go cup of coffee. Jen took several sips and closed her eyes. Lindsay knew Jen's ritual after a late night and left her alone while the coffee saturated her veins. She pulled her knees up to her chest, glanced across the fresh-cut field, and thought about all the times in her life she had been to this park. She saw herself as a toddler, squealing in delight as she ran across the grass while flying a kite for the first time. And she heard her scared and timid childlike voice asking her dad not to let go as he held on to her bike seat while running beside her. And she could feel the excited anticipation as a picnic turned into a playful wrestling match that led to her first kiss with Jasmine. Lindsay released a long sigh as her heart broke a bit. That was the problem with staying in the same town she grew up in. No matter where she went, she kept bumping into her memories. "Okay," the word came out long and slow as Jen opened her eyes. "Now then, tell me, what happened?" Lindsay stayed silent for a few minutes as she let the fog of the past dissipate. She watched a few dried leaves skip across an empty tennis court and heard the pastry bag rustle as Jen dug in. What happened? Where to begin? She took a deep breath and she felt like rephrasing that question to what hasn't happened. Dreams, a lover, a job, none of that had happened. So why should a fantasy about a stranger who wrote magazine articles about traveling unfold any differently? "Well," she turned to Jen, "you know how Cheryl kind of ruined my fantasy crush with Gia last night when she told me about how she doesn't even travel to the places she writes about." "Yeah, sorry about that, sweetie, but knowing Cheryl, that could have been total bullshit, so take it with a grain of salt." Jen waved in a gesture that suggested she'd blow it off. "Well," Lindsay stared at the ground. "Uh-oh, what'd you do?" I kind of sent Gia an email telling her I know she's a fake and I was going to expose her." "You did not," Jen's eyes widened. "I did, and not only that," she replied. Lindsay frowned. "She did not." "Yeah, she did, and guess what? She didn't totally deny it." "Damn, so Cheryl was right," Jen leaned back. "I guess so. I mean, Gia didn't actually come out and say she was a fake or anything like that. She just kind of sidestepped it." "Well, did she say anything?" "Yeah, she asked me what I wanted." "And you said?" Jen raised a brow. "Nothing. I haven't replied." "I see." Jen finished off her brownie and chased it down with the last of her coffee. "Well, what do you want?" Lindsay sat back and tilted her head and thought. Her eyes began welling with tears. "That's just it. I don't know what I want or who I am anymore." We're not talking about Gia anymore, are we?" Lindsay shook her head and stared at her shoes as a tear escaped. Almost a decade and a half of her life was gone, never to return. And as each year came and went, it not only marked the passing of time, it also marked the passing of opportunities. Her life had been nothing like she envisioned, and she wondered if all the patchwork in the world could salvage her dreams. "Anyway," she shrugged, "it doesn't matter. I'm not going to reply. In fact, I'm too embarrassed now to even pursue it. Jen paused for a long moment as she scrunched her face and thought, I think this calls for some good old-fashioned blackmail. Excuse me? Lindsay was taken aback. Tell Gia you won't expose her if she comes to Jacoby and writes an article about us. We're not a gay mecca, but for a small town, we have our share of queerness. Oh, and tell her she has to mention my salon in her article, or the deal's off. Your salon? Lindsay chuckled. Yeah, I could use the plug. Business has been slow and in a steady decline, like most of this town. Yeah, I don't know, Jen. What's not to know? Tell her that's the deal. Besides, how fun would it be to have Jacoby, the little town no one's ever heard of, in L Online? Lindsay sipped her coffee in silent thought. Yeah, nah, I don't think I can do it. This isn't about you, Linz. It's about the town. Think about what it could do for this place. I guess it would be some nice exposure, even though most people around here don't have a clue what L Online is. Straight people in general are clueless. And for once, this isn't about them. We know what L Online is. It'll be our little spotlight of fame, Jen smiled. Lindsay bit into her pastry as she warmed to the thought. Okay, let's just say Gia agrees. Are you the one who's going to show her around? No, I have a salon to run. I wouldn't have the time. That, my dear, will have to be on you. Me? Lindsay's heart rate shot up. Well, yeah, I mean, someone has to show her around town. And since you're the one who kind of put this ball in motion, it makes sense that you should be the one. She's a liar, Jen. So aren't we all in some way or another? Besides, you're about to be a blackmailer, so the two of you will make the perfect pair. And it'll only be for a few days. I mean, come on, how painful could it be? She's gorgeous, witty, connected to national magazines, and you have a huge crush on her. Had, Lindsay grumbled. Okay, had a huge crush on her. Just remember, it's for Jacoby. Take one for the team. Oh, all right, she huffed. I'll send you an email this afternoon with the request. Don't request, demand, Jen punched the air. This is blackmail, Linz. You have to demand she come here or else you'll expose her. Put on your big girl panties. These are your terms. You're in charge. Right, blackmail, the word soured on her lips. I'm in charge. Got it, she groaned. But Jen did make some good points. Besides, if Gia was going to write about a town, why not write about her town? It wasn't like she was asking her to do something she wasn't already doing, right? But as she took another sip of coffee, Gia's words echoed in her head. What do you want? Lindsay leaned into the bench, closed her eyes, and let the breeze blow over her thoughts as she pondered the million-dollar question that seemed impossible to answer.
A liar and a blackmailer. What a romance. Hello, hello.
Hello,
You're reading from your book, Wisdom.
I am.
Good.
This
It's
is my
always good to get the
ready.
nod. Make sure I get the title right. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about the book and you can start reading whenever you're ready.
Sure. So Wisdom is the third in the Serenity Prayer series, which is a group of books that are standalones, but they're all loosely connected by theme around the Serenity Prayer. And in this novel, Sophia Lamont is a young state representative, an up-and-coming politician, and she lives and breathes politics. And Reggie Northrup is a corrections officer who hates politicians down to her bones. And both women have sort of been drafted onto this community design team by the governor in order to address substance use and mental health issues. And in this scene that I'm about to read, Sophia has sort of impulsively invited Reggie to get drinks after they had a meeting of the design team to continue working on some of these issues. So that's where we're going to pick up. As soon as Sophia stepped into the evening air outside the office building, she started to second guess her spontaneous invitation. Why exactly had she invited Reggie to drinks of all things? Reggie looked off balance with their current arrangement too, which instead of hastening Sophia's run to the off-ramp made her want to stay on the road they were on. Am I letting you pick our watering hole? Reggie asked. Do you mind a little bit of a walk? We can stay close if you're too cold. I'm tougher than I look, Reggie said. Okay, tough guy, let's go. Sophia led them away from downtown a few blocks to a hole-in-the-wall establishment that was more restaurant than bar. It served Cape Verdean cuisine. The bar stocked drinks, popular on the island, and it was owned by Sophia's best friend's parents. It wasn't until they walked through the door that Sophia considered what bringing Reggie here of all places would mean. There were going to be questions to answer, a lot of them. Sophia took her seat and motioned for Reggie to sit as well. I promise the food's fantastic. I know I promised a bar, and we ended up here. Reggie looked around. She carefully examined all the details Sophia had stopped noticing a long time ago. Looking at them now was like taking a detailed inspection of a years-old well-loved tattoo. This is so much better than a bar, especially one of the ones downtown that try way too hard. Soon, heaping plates of food arrived, and Sophia's mouth watered like Pavlov's dog after so many years of watching the food come out of that same kitchen. Reggie looked in a similar boat. For the briefest of moments, Sophia wished Reggie looked at her that way, ready to devour the food. I guess we should get to work. Sophia picked up her fork and looked at Reggie above a bite not yet taken. Reggie shook her head vigorously. Nope, not yet. I'm not talking about Bert, the zookeeper, the design team, drugs, my job, any of it while I'm eating anything that smells this good. You can ask me about something else, or we can just talk about the weather. Sophia put her fork down and drummed her fingers together above her plate. This sounds promising. Reggie looked a little alarmed, but she eventually smiled. Is Reggie your full name? Sophia already knew the answer, but she was warming up with a softball toss. No, Regina. My parents had high hopes for a queen, and instead they got me. I don't know, you'd look pretty good with a crown. Sophia waved her fork toward Reggie's head. She leaned forward on her elbows and took a long look at Reggie. She examined her face in great detail. She had high cheekbones and beautiful blue eyes, but her chiseled features and short, neatly cropped hair gave her a sexy androgyny. Reggie laughed. I thought with that inspection you were going to tell me I had food on my face or something. That too. Sophia leaned over and wiped a bit of sauce off Reggie's cheek. She pulled away quickly. She could have just pointed. Now her fingers felt tingly and she didn't know what to say. Thank you. Reggie put her finger to her cheek. It's your turn to ask a question, Sophia said quickly. Reggie sat up straighter and her whole face lit up. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Sophia tilted her head and gave Reggie a grin. You may not want to know the answer to this one. I've always wanted to be a politician. She hid a laugh behind her napkin as Reggie's mouth practically fell open. What kid wants to be a politician? How does a little kid even know what a politician is? This kid, to answer your first question. As for your second, I learned all about civics sitting at this table. But why politics? I don't understand. There are lots of areas to make a difference and push the country forward. Sophia gripped her napkin tightly in her lap. Of course there are, but I didn't want to have a career along any of those paths. I wanted to be a politician. Reggie looked like she was trying to read the Iliad in Mandarin. But why? Because marching and organizing and lobbying gets you to this point if you're lucky and damn good at what you do. Sophia moved her hand along the table. But to get across the finish line, you need your reforms enshrined in law. I want to cross the finish line. Reggie cracked a smile. You better be careful, Representative Lamont. You might make me into a believer. You know how I feel about politicians. Sophia took another bite and shook her fork at Reggie. I think I know you well enough now. You're a stubborn fool, not easily convinced. I'm not going to be deceived by some sweet talk over dinner. All right, I get one more question. If you and I could be having this meeting anywhere in the world, where would we be? Reggie looked up from her plate with a twinkle in her eye. Are you hoping I'll start flirting with you again? Sophia rested her head on her hand and batted her eyelashes dramatically. Now, why would I want to do that? Reggie looked around the restaurant and then back at Sophia. She moved her hand across the table so theirs were almost touching but didn't make contact. I'm pretty happy just where I am. Oh, smooth talker, you are trouble. Sophia was flustered. Reggie would turn anyone's head, and she'd brought her here of all places on what felt much too much like a date. Should we finally get to work? I was thinking we should meet weekly if you're open to it. If some weeks there's nothing to talk about, we could always cancel. Sophia started writing notes as she talked. Or we could just come back here, eat more delicious food, and you can tell me if money were no object, what's the most outlandish thing you'd buy? Reggie pushed back from the table to stretch out her legs. Sophia stopped writing and took in Reggie's long torso and legs. It felt like a tease, but she could tell Reggie was just trying to get comfortable. That's easy, I'd buy. Reggie sat up and held up her finger. Nope, no answering. That's a question for a week when we don't have anything to talk about. Right now we're up to our tits and work. That's no time for nonsense like that. Sophia thought of what spending so much time with Reggie would mean for her, personally and professionally. She started to sweat. Not the feminine glow kind of sweat women supposedly did that was delicate and sexy. This was the pit-stained flop sweat that gave away the bad guy in an interrogation. Except she wasn't doing anything wrong, so she had nothing to worry about. At least that's what she kept telling herself. So why did it feel like a lie? Thank you.
I don't know which line I like better, but I think I might go with look like she was trying to read the Iliad in Mandarin. Like that. That's going to be the line of the night. Thank you so much, Jessie. That was awesome. The link to Jessie's book is in the chat roll if you would like to pick it up. These books are on sale tonight. All righty. Next up, we have Mary Burns. Hi, Mary. How you doing? Oh, I think you're still muted. There you go.
I always forget that part.
Awesome. So you're reading from your new book, Suspecting Her. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about it, and you can start reading whenever you're ready.
That's our cover, which I really love. The gal who does the covers here is fabulous. Okay, let's see. I'm going to read you the little bit that I wrote because it's just easier for me to do that. The book is about Erin O'Connor. She's an artist who blew up her own career at her first major show when she sprayed a tube of paint on the woman that her girlfriend was having an affair with. And she's been suffering the self-imposed consequences ever since. So to rescue her from her impoverished state, her best friend, Nat Robichaux, an African-American journalist blogger, hires Erin to help her with a story about racist practices in the city's real estate market. From the first time Erin meets Catherine Williams at an apartment showing, where she's the realtor of record, she's attracted to her. But Nat warns her to steer clear because Catherine could be involved in the real estate scheme, and Nat doesn't want Erin to put the story at risk by getting involved with her, which is, of course, something Erin would do. At that showing, however, Catherine invites Erin to another apartment privately. Hoping for something more, Erin goes. The apartment turns out to belong to Catherine's ex, and Erin learns something about herself and about Catherine. So here we go. At the top of the stairs, Catherine unlocked 5R and swung the door open onto a sun-filled oasis of carved oak walls and floors the color of autumn acorns. Erin stepped in and an immediate peace settled on her. After a moment, it occurred to her that the cozy yet stately living room looked staged, except that the furniture was too nice, not the big box chain store stuff one saw in most of the nobody really lives here, but we're pretending they do apartments for sale in Manhattan. Wow. Erin turned to look at the whole room and the adjoining open kitchen, noting the hallway she was sure led to a bedroom, and then ran her hand along the back of the navy blue couch. Several red pillows sat on the couch, each with a different landmark building done in needlepoint. The Empire State Building in one, the Chrysler Building on another, and Radio City Music Hall featured on the third pillow. 2 wingback chairs upholstered in a smart regimental stripe sat opposite the couch, a butler's table between them. This isn't a usual apartment staging, Erin said, looking at Catherine, who fit very neatly into the decor in her own navy and red. They're from my apartment. Oh, is there anything left in your apartment? Catherine laughed. Erin liked the quiet depth of it. I wanted it to look nicer than usual, so it sells quickly. Too many painful memories here for me. Now that Susan's decided to sell it, I don't want it on my hands that long. I certainly understand that. Been there, done that? Catherine asked. Yes. Erin thought of Adele, who had breezed into her life right after college, swept her off her feet, and then made her life a living hell 5 years later when she had an affair with her boss, who ultimately won the battle for Adele right when Erin needed her most. After she'd recovered, it had been one ultra-short relationship after another, so she wouldn't get burned again. For the first time, Erin realized, standing in the middle of someone else's home, even if it was for sale, that she wanted something more. Erin? Erin snapped back and knew from the look on Catherine's face that she'd wandered far away. Sorry, took a train I shouldn't have gotten on, and apparently got off at the wrong stop. She did a number on you, didn't she? No. Yes. I don't know. Or maybe I didn't see that it was over. My mistake. Never a mistake if you learn from it. Erin regarded her and then looked out the window. Only a flippant response came to her, and it didn't feel right to say it out loud. Did you? Erin looked back at her questioningly. Learn from your mistake. I think I took the wrong lessons away from it, and I'm only realizing that now. Why don't you have dinner with me tomorrow night, and we can discuss whether or not it's too late to learn? Erin felt the pulse in her neck gently pounding. She could hardly take her eyes off Catherine, but she was pretty certain dinner with her wasn't a good idea on a number of levels. Her thought about a one-night stand vanished into her promise to Nat not to screw anything up with this story. Catherine would definitely complicate things. "You're not on the market to buy an apartment, are you?" Catherine asked. "No, but I bet you knew that when you invited me to see this place." I think I did." "Maybe we can also discuss what you are in the market for over a nice plate of Thai food or Mongolian barbecue." "I kind of like the diner on the corner at Broadway, unless you have agonizing memories from a past relationship there." So much for not allowing things to be complicated. Catherine snorted. Susan would never have been caught dead in a diner, and I do like a good bacon cheeseburger now and then. 7:30 tomorrow night? She picked up a set of keys from the small silver plate she dropped them into by the door. "You work late hours," Erin said, taking one last look around before walking to the door. "Apartments don't sell themselves." Catherine opened the door and walked out. "But they do, don't they? Either you fall in love with a place or you don't." Erin followed her out. Catherine considered the remark, the door still open. "You have a point. I know I'm right. Tell me one thing you've said to a prospective buyer that made a difference and got them to buy a place they were iffy about." "The gold standard in New York City apartments, of course." Catherine pointed down the hall. "Washer and dryer and a separate little laundry room." Erin paused on the top step and looked at her, a smile breaking slowly. "I win," Catherine said, a teasing smirk challenging Erin. She knew immediately that she liked sparring with this woman. Catherine wielded a sharp sword, and Erin liked the challenge she presented. As they walked down the stairs, she banished the image of Nat admonishing her. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. And I can definitely attest that the washer and dryer does make a difference. Very important component when you're looking for a place. Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Barbara Ann Wright.
Hello.
Hello. You're reading from The Scout and the Scoundrel. Is that right?
Yes, my best Vanna White.
I love it. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about the book and start reading?
Alrighty. Well, as Sandy mentioned, I'll be reading from my fantasy romance, The Scout and the Scoundrel. In this section, Roni the thief is waiting to be accepted into military service in lieu of going to prison, while Zara, her would-be commander, looks at all the available prison candidates. Nothing had ever made Roni want a bath more than seeing a beautiful woman after she'd gone 4 days without a good scrub. And 2.5 of those days had been spent in jail or prison, neither up for the award of cleanest place in town. At least she didn't have a mirror to see how awful she looked, as if she would have been able to look anywhere but at this fit military officer with dark eyes, cheekbones for days, and the confident stride of a hunter. That whip-like gaze said anyone who didn't hop to her orders would be up for some serious punishment. Yes, ma'am, sign her up. Roni tried to stand a little straighter among her fellow inmates, hating the weight of the leg irons that kept her from adopting a more confident pose. She did what she could to push her hair back, to tuck some behind her ears, and shifted the hairpins in an effort to flatten the top. She would have loved to wipe her face, but suspected her hands were among the dirtiest bits of her person. If she was going to impress this hunter, she'd have to do it with charisma alone. Good freaking luck, she forced down a sigh. 2 men with officers' badges stood by the hunter, and they conversed softly with each other, one holding a sheaf of papers. 2 other soldiers watched Roni and her fellow convicts with intense frowns. When she'd gotten down from the prison cart at the gate, a snide-looking base guard had told them that some of them would be trained on an accelerated timetable and that the prison cart would be back every morning for whoever failed. Well, Roni wouldn't be on it again. Whether that meant working hard and passing through this training or escaping at the earliest opportunity, she didn't know. But she was not going back to the short life that awaited her in prison. She squared her shoulders. Now to pass the initial inspection of her soon-to-be commanding officer. Oh, gods, she hoped it was that hunter. They were made for each other, nearly the same height, both tans, used to working outdoors, and the woman had a freaking golden helmet on. Who else but the perfect partner for a thief came with their own loot? But how should she play it? The only army personnel she'd seen before were those who liked to slum it in the bad part of town where she lived. Drunken louts looking to throw their weight around, they appreciated sass, but not a direct challenge. But the hunter didn't swagger like some cocksure bravo. She was composed, neat, above it. Until the red-headed man started gesturing to the prisoners, the hunter had even ignored them, but now her face held a hint of disapproval, if not outright disdain. Damn, that was tricky. Meekness wouldn't help her, not in the army, and eagerness could be doubted or misinterpreted. Something told Roni that flirting would get her ass thrown back on the cart faster than brandishing a knife. As the hunter walked down the line, eyeing each of them, Roni tried to mimic her, stiffening her spine, keeping her face attentive but uncaring, hiding her attraction. If she decided to stay, there would be time for flirting later, after being sufficiently impressive. The hunter examined Roni with the same half frown she'd given everyone else. Then she turned so abruptly her dark ponytail fluttered behind her. Roni's fingers twitched, but she resisted the urge to reach for it and run her fingers through those silky strands. How am I supposed to tell? The hunter said to the other officers. The redhead smirked, clearly enjoying the fact that she seemed confused. There was some grudge there. That was useful to know. The bald man shrugged minutely and said, "Maybe talk to them?" With a sigh for the ages, the hunter looked down the convict line again. "My name is Commander Zara Della Monacer," she said. "I lead a scouting unit that will be taking on 2 of you." Her mouth twisted slightly. Commander Della Monacer was not happy at all. "Besides the chance to get out of prison," the commander said with a sneer, "why do you want to be scouts? How are you qualified?" Leg irons jangled as everyone shuffled. "I spent some time in the woods," someone down the line said. I can light fires, set snares, that sort of thing." The commander nodded. "Anyone else?" she asked. When no one answered, she began pointing at them one by one, asking you, over and over. She got various qualifications like small, muscled, sneaky, and one "fuck you" who was pulled out of line and hauled back to the gate. Roni tisked. Even with the promise of freedom, some people just couldn't bear doing as they were told. Wait, she thought. Gods and devils, that was the answer. "I can follow orders," Roni said quickly. When the commander fixed on her with lightning quickness, she added, "I don't know how to be a scout, but I'm smart enough to learn." The commander nodded again, and she didn't sneer. Roni held on to the most fragile hope. The hunter had to pick her, had to. If she went back to prison, her old cronies would kill her for not paying her dues. Please, 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 she thought, squeezing her eyes shut and praying to every god who might listen. That's it.
Awesome. I have to tell you, I was going to make a particular joke when your reading first started because you have a woman in leg irons, but then as it progressed and she was in prison, I was like, oh no, that's like probably not an appropriate joke.
No.
But now she can follow commands and I feel like, come on.
You'll just have to see if it's the fantasy romance BDSM book you've been looking for.
I mean, it could be a thing, right?
There's only one way to find out.
I can help. Thank you so much. Awesome reading.
Sure.
All right. Next up, we have Georgia Beers. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Georgia is reading from On the Rocks. Is that right? Oh,
Yes, I am.
I always get it wrong. Always flip the
You
left.
got it right. I'm so proud of you.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and start reading whenever you're ready.
Okay. On the Rocks is the second in the Swizzle Stick romance series. This is Vanessa's story. There's one more after this. And the theme for this reading is getting to know each other. And instead of reading a scene where my love interests are getting to know each other, I wanted to read a scene where the reader is getting to know one of my main characters through the eyes of her family. So what has happened so far is that Vanessa is having feelings for Grace, who is the mother of one of her second grade students. They have flirted. They have been in the same place a lot. They've done a lot of flirting, a little bit of testing the waters. They've had a little makeout session, but Vanessa is worried about jumping into actual dating. And she's trying to decide if a real date is the right thing to do or if she should back off. This scene takes place in the bar back, which is the back of Martini's bar, which is owned by Vanessa's cousin, Julia. And in the bar back is Julia, Amelia, the other cousin, and Julia's girlfriend, Savannah. And Vanessa is bouncing things off of them, trying to figure out what she should do. You got to do pros and cons, Amelia said. It's the best way to see it all laid out. Savannah was nodding and pointing at Amelia. I think she's right. So let's do that. She jumped up and went to the corner of the bar back where Julia's desk sat and returned to the couch with a pad of paper and a pen. Really? Vanessa said. She was skeptical. She could admit that. Pros and cons list seems so cold, so analytical. She's the mother of a student, Amanda said to Savannah, completely ignoring Vanessa. That's the big one. Savannah scribbled on the pad. True. Well, and the whole impending divorce thing, Julia threw in from behind the practice bar, where she had about 8 various bottles out and was experimenting with different combinations. She has trouble with that too. Hey, Vanessa whined, feeling slightly insulted. What? Amelia asked. She's right. Your initial assessment of Grace was that she was getting a divorce and not paying attention to how it was affecting her kid. Plus, parent of a student is on your no-no list, isn't it? Vanessa sighed and nodded. Well, I don't think that now, though, about the divorce thing. Still, Amelia nodded at Savannah. Put it on the list. How old is she? Julia asked, slapping the top onto a martini shaker and shaking away. Vanessa glanced down at her hands and said, 30, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure no women under 35 was also on the list of no-nos, Amelia pointed out, and Vanessa shot her a glare. Her cousin seemed to be enjoying this. What else was on this list? Savannah asked, clearly curious. No straight girls, Julia called out. Vanessa snorted and muttered, she's definitely not straight. Savannah leaned against her playfully. Got proof of that, do you? Oh, yes. But wait, Savannah stopped jotting notes and looked from one woman to the next. What exactly is the problem here? I mean, you're not marrying the girl. It's a date. One date. Why are we freaking out and making lists? Julia opened her mouth to speak, but Amelia held up a hand. Allow me. She turned to Savannah. Since you're still fairly new here, you don't know that our dear Vanessa tends to be a one and done kind of girl. I don't know what that means, Savannah said, glancing at Vanessa, who sighed and sat back against the couch and waved a hand at Amelia, giving her the floor. Well, Savannah, let me paint the picture. Amelia stood up and began to pace like she was giving a lecture. You don't have to enjoy this so much, Vanessa muttered. Amelia ignored her. While Vanessa dated here and there in college, she had trouble with anything that had the word casual in front of it. She made air quotes. Casual acquaintance, casual dating, casual sex. Those things don't work for Vanessa. She's not wired that way. Savannah turned to look at her. Vanessa shrugged. She met a girl named Callie right out of college and fell instantly in love, ready to settle down, buy a house, and have babies. They lasted, she looked to Vanessa, how long? 5 years, Vanessa supplied. 5 years. Suffice it to say that Callie didn't have nearly the same issues with casual things as our dear Vanessa did, and that eventually ended. And since her? Savannah asked. Another shrug from Vanessa. There's been nobody for a few years now, Julia finally chipped in. Not for lack of interest, she added, and Vanessa got the feeling she was trying to soften the ache that Amelia's words had brought up. I mean, of course, Savannah said. Turning to Vanessa, she asked, there are mirrors in your house, right? Vanessa kissed her on the cheek. You are a doll. Turning to Julia, she pointed at Savannah and ordered, keep her, will you? Planning on it, was Julia's reply, eyes on her bottles. Savannah blew a kiss in Julia's direction, then held her hands and said, so the concern here is that if Vanessa goes on a date, on the one date with Grace, there is danger she could fall head over heels in love and it could get messy? In a nutshell, yes, Amelia confirmed, taking one of the stools in the practice bar. But you guys, Savannah looked from one of them to the next and finally settled her gaze on Vanessa. I mean, isn't that life? When not one of the 3 cousins responded, she went on. We don't get to decide who we're going to fall for, right? Or when, or how. We just do. We just fall. That's part of the joy, the surprise, that feeling of having no control. That's the wonder of it. She blinked at them as they continued to not talk. Oh my God, what is wrong with the Martini family? But she punctuated it with a laugh to cushion the criticism. Vanessa, just go. Have dinner with this woman who you are clearly attracted to. Go with an open mind and no expectations. Have dinner. Talk with her. Enjoy yourself. Maybe make out some more. And instead of trying to map out your entire possible future with her, just see what happens. Okay? Vanessa let the words soak in. It was all very simple, and she was being kind of ridiculous. She knew that. She'd always known that. But seeing her parents split up had left an impression on her and had defined the kind of person she was now. She knew that too. But knowing something and being able to fight it were two very different things. And she'd done her best to be 100% sure about anything she stepped into. She didn't like surprises. Her expression must have been worrisome because Savannah laid a warm hand on her thigh. It's just a date. The end, but not really, but kind of.
But not really.
But not really.
I need these people in my life. I definitely need friends like those. And I love
They're fun. They were fun to write.
You just fall. Awesome. If everyone can jump back on, please. We have a little bit of time for questions. If you have any questions for our lovely panelists, please do pop them in the Q&A and we will be happy to answer them. I do have one to get us started. And that question is, do you plan the getting to know you scenes in advance? Do you kind of plan where they're going to be? Do you sprinkle them throughout the novel? Or do you more pantser it and kind of let the characters decide when they're going to reveal their true selves? Barbara, how about you?
Well, I never let the characters decide anything because they're fake and God knows what they do if left on their own. But I do try to think, like, as I'm writing the story, I have the plot figured out. Not the romance plot, usually like the action-y plot. And I try to put in where would be a good point for this, for them to say, hey, tell me about your daddy issues, then let's make out. But it's usually like, I can't put it in the middle of a fight scene. So, it's got to go somewhere. So a lot of times I'm like, anytime the action is lulling, I'm like, let's have a very serious conversation.
I like that. That's definitely one way to keep things moving. Awesome. When you run out of daddy issues. It's always good.
Yes. Stab someone or have someone stab someone else.
Mary, how about you? Do you plan your getting to know you scenes in advance? Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, got it now. Yeah, those are, you'd think I didn't know what I was doing here. Those are some of the few scenes that I really do plan. Because I think they're important. Somebody once said the first kiss scene is really important, and they were absolutely right. But so is the first getting to know you, because that's your reader really, are they going to love or are they not going to love these characters, and are they going to take this trip with you or not? So yeah, I really work on that first one.
Sure. Georgia, how about you? Do you plan them?
I don't plan out all of the dialogue, but I usually do plan out the places where it's going to happen, the settings, whether it's a date or it's something they stumble upon. I tend to give myself like an overview, like here's, for example, okay, they're going on a date and they're going out to dinner. And then I write that, and whatever comes while I'm writing it, that kind of happens on the fly. The dialogue kind of happens as I'm going along and figuring out how they're feeling and which way this should go. I don't plan the whole thing ahead of time, but I plan everything around it ahead of time.
Oh, love that. Jessie, how about you?
I definitely plan sort of the big moments, like how they meet, sort of that first kiss, those kind of things. Have a general outline. I usually, before I start a book or pretty early on, will kind of write out sort of a whole outline with the major kind of plot points that I want to hit, or the scenes that I know that I want, and kind of figure out where they fit in. And then with some books, there's like a secondary, not romance plot that's going on that I kind of want to also hit some points and make sure that, it doesn't all happen in the first third of the novel and then I have nothing to talk about. So I'll plot that out and then map the two on. So there's usually sort of parallel things, but I definitely plot those out.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Lots of plotters here tonight. So, okay. How much is too much when you're getting to know someone? How do you avoid info dumps? How do you avoid your characters coming across like kind of creepy, revealing all their daddy issues up front? How do you decide, how much to reveal at what moments in your story? Mary?
That is a hard one, because you sort of want everything right up front there, but you can't do that. You sort of have to be like peeling the onion and let things come a little bit at a time. So that's really helpful if you're, planning things out and plotting things, and you can figure out where that onion should be peeled.
Mhm.
I figure, if I'm writing it and I get bored, then I know it's too much. And so I pull back.
Yeah. And I'm sure in your story too, where there's a little bit of an intrigue thread as well, you have to be very judicious about what it is that the characters reveal and know about each other as the story continues.
Exactly. Yeah.
Georgia, how about you?
Well, I agree with what Mary said in that you have to spread it out a little bit. You can't just like have chapter 2, here's everything about character A. It's boring. It's unrealistic. You want your reader to learn about your characters as the love interest is learning about your characters. And I also find that a good way to learn about a character is through their friends. I'm a big fan of dialogue. So I'm a big fan of, instead of me as the narrator or as the writer telling you, here are some things about character A. Number 1, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, she has daddy issues. Number 3, I like the idea of characters talking to each other. Main characters speaking with their best friend and their best friend bringing up something that the reader goes, oh, okay, that's probably going to play into the story later. I think it's good to pepper it all in as the story goes along and from different information people, from different sources. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm a writer, words are my thing.
Information people works.
Information people. I like that. I'm going to use that.
How are you, fellow information person? How was your day?
And I think you're right too. I think our friends and our family, and I mean, they know us in different ways too. Like our family will know different things and have a different history than our friends do. And then even that the love interest does.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So getting the knowingness from all those different angles is very cool. Jesse, how about you? How do you avoid that info dump?
So I haven't written this kind of character, but this gives me an interesting idea. So I think an info dump of like 4 pages of exposition, that's just like paragraph after paragraph. Obviously, somebody would just throw my novel across the room and I would expect them to. But I think it would be interesting to have a character who's just like, here I am, here's all my stuff, all my daddy. So I think if it was done as a character who just is like that person who lays it all out there, the first time you meet them, you learn about, their irritable bowel syndrome and just like everything. That would be, I think, kind of interesting because there are those people in the world. So then I don't think that it would be something to avoid necessarily, as long as you were able to still make them likable and relatable and, somebody that you could see falling in love, or it's a best friend that shares all your deepest, darkest secrets with somebody that you really have a crush on and wish that they would just shut up, which we all have that friend too. So I think in that way, maybe you don't want to avoid it. But I think if you're just writing and writing and writing, telling everybody in exposition, that is quite boring. And you do need to avoid that.
Yeah.
I think if you did it in first person, that would work, like almost as a comedic kind of thing.
Yep.
Hi, I'm so here's my shit.
Yeah. Sort of stream of
funny.
consciousness
It could be
person.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
It could be
think there's
done.
ways to play with it. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. I will look forward to those proposals coming in soon. And Barbara, how about you? How do you avoid the info dump? How much is too much?
Well, I like to really keep the perspective tight with the character so that we're not looking at her and watching her, we're looking out of her eyes, so that we're privy to all her thoughts and stuff. And my thinking is you don't just think about your entire life. You just sit around, unless of course it's 2 a.m. and your brain won't let you sleep. But usually you're thinking about stuff that's relevant to the moment, to the situation. And I really like the whole, I am maintaining an outward facade. And then in my head, I'm panicky as hell. I like writing those kinds of characters, but then I also like to write ones where a thought comes into their head and they say it without even thinking about it. So I think it's keeping it tight to that POV will let anybody avoid an info dump.
For sure. All right. Is there a difference between your readers getting to know your characters and your characters getting to know each other? Are there things that you may reveal to the reader first for some reason? Obviously, you can't quite reveal it to the characters first. That would be interesting. You could try. But is there a difference for you as a writer, or do you think it all kind of evolves organically? Jessie?
I think some of it depends on what kind of book you're writing, because I think in some intrigue, sort of mystery novels, you may drop breadcrumbs or keep one character in the dark more than another in order to kind of move the plot along. I always kind of think about sort of once you create these characters and set them free in the world, they mean different things to different readers. So I think your readers get to know your characters in ways that you don't expect, you didn't anticipate. And so I think every time somebody new reads the characters, then they're getting to know them in a very different way than maybe you did when you wrote them or thought that they would be interpreted. And so I think that happens probably every time somebody new reads your book. And I think sometimes that works to your detriment. And sometimes it's a really cool thing when you hear somebody say, I love this character. She was X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I think, really? That wasn't true for me at all, but I'm glad it worked for you. So I think depending on who's reading your book, the characters could be somebody different to them. And I think that's a really wonderful thing about the books that we write.
Yeah, for sure. I think readers bring their own lens and their own experiences too to the characters. Awesome. Barbara, how about you? Is there a difference between your reader getting to know your characters and your characters getting to know each other?
Definitely. Since the reader's in her head, I think she knows her very well from the beginning, and she knows that in her own head, she's a lovable mess, but outside she appears polished and well put together, so that the other characters are perceiving her as polished and well put together. But while we're writing along in her head, we know she's a mess. So that if she's in a romantic conversation and her daddy issues suddenly pop into her head and she says, I probably shouldn't say anything about my daddy issues, that the reader's right there with her going, no, don't mention your daddy issues. Keep that back, that they're either cheering for her or whatever, but that they know her much better than the characters. Even if the characters get to know her, they won't be riding around in her mind.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I'm so glad I brought up daddy issues in the beginning.
It really has been the winner of the evening. And I think you'll get a lot of proposals about that now.
We're gonna retitle this panel Daddy Issues, Getting to Know You. Know. Mary, how about you? Is there a difference between your reader getting to know your characters and your characters getting to know each other?
I think, like Jessie said, it depends on what you're writing, what you're doing. I love the reader knowing certain things that the other characters don't. On the other hand, one of my favorite Broadway plays, August Osage County, there's a moment where the heroine tells you something, well, the entire audience, that nobody knew this and nobody saw it coming, just out of left field, and the entire audience, and I rarely see this, gasped, audibly, and I thought, ooh, that's really delicious. And I love a moment in the book like that where nobody knows what's coming, and there it is, and I just love to practically levitate out of bed. So I love, because I read in bed, so I love those moments where the reader has not seen it coming. But I also like the reader to be very present, with what's going on in the like Barbara said, with what's going on in the main character's head.
Yeah, for sure. It's a balance of those two. Georgia, how about you?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think because I write romance, I am more in the camp of, there's usually a difference, because I want the reader to get to know the characters through each other's eyes. And I think that I completely just lost my train of thought.
Well, I think it's a really good point that you made. It's
Wow.
kind of a mix of both,
I hate
right?
when that happens. It's like poof. Was there steam? Did anybody see smoke? It feels
Totally
like-
happened to me too.
I think that there's definitely a difference between your readers getting to know your characters and your characters getting to know each other, because I feel like the characters get to know each other a little slower.
Mhm.
And like Mary was saying, there might be something that's like the big reveal. And if there's a story with a big reveal, generally one of the characters doesn't know that until it's revealed.
Yeah.
Thus the phrase, the big reveal. While I do like, as Mary said, while I do like something that takes everybody by surprise, I kind of think that in a romance, that's a little less likely. And the reader's probably going to know, because part of the joy of the romance is going, oh my God, when is she going to find this out? She's going to find this out. It's going to be bad. It's going to be a mess. I mean, that's part of the whole anticipation of the dark moment in a romance. So I do think that there's a difference between the two.
Good. It's good. Made sense. Thank you very much, information people. Awesome panel.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow is all about kissing. So please do join us for that. It might be Thursday. Who knows? But I'm just kissing all week. One of these nights, it's going to be kissing. Thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing authors. And we will see you all tomorrow night.
All right. Thanks, Andy.